Hello and welcome to another edition of Midlands Business Update, the big centre show that looks at the big issues in our local economy. And they don't come much bigger than this right now, because frustrated farmers have been taking to the streets over the past few days in protest at the amount of money they are being paid for their milk. The issue impacts on farms right across the West Midlands, which provide many hundreds of jobs. So, what's it all about? Who's right? Who's wrong? And most importantly of all, what can be done about it? Well, I'm hoping that the man who joins me now is going to answer a lot of these questions. Michael Oakes farms between Birmingham and Bromsgrove and is the National Farmers Union's Dairy Board Vice Chairman, as well as chairing the Dairy Board right here in the West Midlands. Did I get that right?
Yes, spot on.
Excellent. Milk, the issue with milk has been in the media, out of the media, in the media a lot for probably over 1, 2, 3 years now, hasn't it?
Well, I mean, if we look back over the last 5 years, we've had quite a lot of volatility, and we've sort of had peaks and troughs, and in that time, you know, we've got a bit upset because actually we can't see that we can make any money. But actually, what's happened now, you know, there's almost been a perfect storm, because we've gone into a trough, which actually none of us can see just how low it's going, and all the sort of consultants and all the advisors said we were going to come out of it 6 months ago, and actually we're still going down. And now they're talking about sometime in 2016, you know, maybe 2017. And the question that I'm getting asked by fellow farmers continually is, you know, how low and how long is this going to go?
Who's to blame?
Nobody's really to blame as such. I mean, 2012 was a really, really bad year, and that was the last time it was in the press. And the problem then was that there was money in the supply chain, but you know, it wasn't being fairly shared out. So actually, the processors had sort of given away their margin by competing to get the retail business, and then the retailers sort of squeezed them a bit more, and they came straight back to the farmers. And then we had sort of rallies and various things, and you know, it was put right. And then the world market sort of picked up. China started buying dairy products by the boatload. They just could not get enough dairy products. And actually, it just looked like, for the first time for a long time, we could start to reinvest in the business, start to replace machinery, start to put up new buildings, you know, do stuff that would increase animal welfare. And that's to get your overdrafts down as well, because that was key for me in my business. And then, all of a sudden, we fell off a cliff. And what started it really was the Russian ban. You know, when Russia said, actually, we're not going to take any sort of, you know, food, dairy products, as well as various other sort of things from the West. We were, you know, that instant, because they were the second biggest buyer after China. And then at the same time, China took its foot off the pedal and probably overbought, and is still buying. It's still a massive consumer of dairy products, but nowhere near on the scale that it was doing last year.
And is part of the problem for dairy farmers in the region that there's a limit to how much they can diversify to offset all of that?
Well, it's you know, if I was making widgets in the Black Country, I'd probably change the lathe or change something else to make a slightly different product. You can't turn a cow off. You can't actually just think, actually, we'll lay everybody off, you know, give them 4 weeks holiday just to actually get back, you know, supply and demand back into kilter. It just doesn't work like that. You know, it's a long term sort of business where you're sort of planning ahead. You know, what the crops I put in the spring, I won't use till almost 12 months to feed the cattle. So everything is planning ahead, and you just can't turn them off.
Now, we've seen over the last few days, we've seen cows in supermarkets, we've seen farmers going in and stripping the shelves of some of the stores. What do you think that's done for the public's perception of the issue? I
mean, I've done that myself. I was down at Asda in Telford one day last week, and
what sort of response did you get?
Massive public support. I mean, it was, for me, it was, I couldn't believe, I think we had 1 or 2 negative, but you know, as a whole, really positive. Because I think people actually, you know, value being able to drive down the M6, the M5 or whatever, and actually look across and see cows in the field, and what's always been there, they actually quite value that, I think.
I mean, we've seen, you get the impression as well, don't you, that the retailers don't want the public to turn on them, so they want to be seen to be maybe doing something. We've seen Morrison's, I think, have said that they're going to launch this new
Morrison's has come up with this
range,
farm-friendly milk. Actually, it's a little bit of a scam, because, you know, in effect, they're going to put 10p on 4 pints of milk, but it's the consumer that's going to pay for all that. I think it's not going to cost Morrison's anything whatsoever, and they can always either promote it or not, and decide how much of a success that will be. But right this minute, they've got a massive PR, you know, win, But I mean, I think Morrison's on the way here. I've just received an email, and Asda have actually trumped that, because they've actually come out and said we're going to pay 28p for every litre of milk that they're getting.
It's a bit like petrol prices
Yeah.
in supermarkets, isn't it? As soon as one starts, the domino
Well,
effect
I mean,
goes,
they've been
and-
having this massive race to the bottom with the retail price of milk. And I, like anybody else, like a good deal. And consumers, you know, they're hard pressed. So I can't blame anybody from taking advantage of those deals. But the retailers are just almost fighting to get to the bottom. But I mean, what Asda's done, it's actually perhaps put a floor in what the farmer's price coming down within, you know, within the liquid milk sector.
Because I think the latest figures I saw said they reckon you're getting 23.8 pence a litre, and it costs about 28 pence
Yeah,
to
yeah. I
produce.
mean, you know, mine's about 20. Like, you know, your figures are spot on. My price is 20, just under 24p. My cost of production is 28. My milk check, we get paid monthly for what we produce in you know, in a month behind. My month check now is £15,000 lower than it was 12 months ago for exactly the same volume of milk, and you know, that's £500 a day. You know, well, I cannot make up £500 a day. Okay, some of my costs have gone down, you know, and we've got rid of a little bit of labour, and we haven't really got enough now. But you're trying to get through this and find a way through this. But that's what's happening on lots of farms throughout the country. Is, you know, people are getting laid off, you know, or people are leaving because actually it's quite stressful if everybody's in a bad mood because nobody's making any money.
Well, and you talked about, you know, people not knowing how far the trough's
Yeah,
going to fall.
yeah.
What you need, isn't it, is a light at the end of the tunnel, isn't it? Do you actually think jobs are already being lost in great number in the dairy industry in the West Midlands, and will continue to?
Oh yeah,
to
yeah.
do
I've
so?
got 2 less people that work on my farm than I did 12 months ago, and we weren't over. We weren't flush with labour, and you know. But you know, now the problem I've got, the guys that are left are feeling under pressure, you know. And whilst they're doing lots of hours and they quite like the paycheck that comes with that, ultimately they've got families, they've got lives, and they don't want to be under that pressure for too long.
So I mean, in your position, particularly in the West Midlands, NFU, what sort of dialogue are you having with dairy farmers at the moment then?
I mean, it's like if you sort of represent farmers or any business association, you know, most of the time you don't get that many phone calls. You might get the odd one irate farmer who thinks you've said the wrong thing. I'm getting at least one a day now, and it is farmers are saying, I don't know if I can get through the winter. You know, I don't know. You know, they've gone to the bank about 6 months ago and maybe increased the overdraft a little bit. And at that time, they were thinking that the market would have come back in the autumn or any time now. That's clearly not happened, so their budgets have gone out the window. So they don't really want to go back to the bank. And some have perhaps borrowed from family. And actually, once you've sort of done those 2 things and, you know, and maybe they've shed a bit of labour, they cannot reduce the costs enough to potentially keep going.
And yet, somewhere down the line between a farm producing the milk and the consumer buying the milk, someone's making some money somewhere.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, processors don't do it for nothing. I mean, some of the processors are PLCs, some are privately owned, some are co-ops. So there's a whole range out there. And you know, like you say, they're not doing it for nothing. And the retailers, you know, in effect, some are possibly using it as a real loss leader just to get people in store. And it is devaluing our product, and that is one of the frustrations.
So actually, from your point of view, are you saying that probably the retailers are not the biggest, hesitate to use the word villains of the piece, in the current situation then?
The fact that they are sort of racing to the bottom and don't actually seem to want to pay a reasonable price for our product, which actually, you know, if the liquid milk isn't there in the UK, you can't get it from somewhere else. Yeah. You know, if we all want to drink UHT, you know, on your cornflakes in the morning, that's where we're heading towards, because that liquid milk, you know, but you can't really bring it in from France. Yeah. There's not enough in Ireland. You know,
it's a bit like a game of poker, isn't it? You're actually wanting someone to move first.
Well, it is, but they also know that, you know, farming isn't just a business. It's quite often a passion. It's quite often something that, you know, you did and your father did maybe, and you know, we actually will put up with quite a lot. You know, I've got contractors that work for me that are 2 young lads, and they're saying, actually, if our business isn't paying, we will just change it. We'll do something else tomorrow. And the fact that dairy farmers are almost a little bit sort of passionate about it, and they're attached to their animals, and they, you know, there's years of breeding gone into it. That gets abused a little bit.
Yeah,
because
we don't
it's harder
quit. To detach yourself,
So it's not just a business. There's an emotional attachment to it as well.
So it's a final question then, really, Michael. If you'd got fairy magic wand and you could just cast it now to solve the situation, what would you do?
Oh, well, we actually get the retailers to recognise that actually that we, we will be forced out. Even the best of us that want to stay in will be forced out because the economics just don't stack up at this moment in time. So if they actually want to, guarantee that they're getting British milk and British cheese, we need to actually think outside the box and change that. Look down the supply chain and make sure that we're all getting a share of the profit.
And you feel like really it's the job of the farmers to instigate that discussion, just to keep things moving.
Well, we're the ones that are in pain. The processors aren't feeling the pain to the degree we are, and the retailers certainly aren't.
Michael, thank you very much. I'm sure the milk debate will continue. After the break, we'll be switching unions as public service organisation Unison give us their take on the current situation. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back. Now, before the break, we were chatting with the National Farmers Union about how the current milk price dispute has been hitting local farmers. Well, from agriculture, we now move on to public service, and I'm delighted to welcome Ravi Subramanian, who's Unison's West Midlands Regional Secretary. Ravi, that's a broad title, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just paint us a picture about Unison in the West Midlands, the size of the organisation. It's a big branch, isn't it?
Yeah, well, our region has over 115,000 members working across the public services, so from home care workers to cleaners in schools, nurses in hospitals, domestics in hospitals, police staff, so not police officers, but all the staff who support police officers in their work, seen to crime officers, front office staff, and a range of support staff in higher and further education.
I would imagine that their needs are quite different, are they?
They vary. I mean, in some respects they're similar, in many respects they're different as well. So, the issues that are facing nurses in hospitals with sort of the real difficulties in A&E, which we heard about over the past few months, are probably different to, say, for instance, social workers who are having to deal with, increasing demands on social care that they're having to deal with. Although there's an interrelationship, because actually one of the things that became established with the A&E crisis was because there weren't enough, wasn't enough home care provision available to get elderly and infirm patients out of hospital and to get them back into their homes. So hence it was, holding beds in hospitals. And that's where our members in social services, who are social workers, were telling us actually they could see some of this problem was going to occur. So it's that interrelationship of actually, you can see the interrelationship. So the cuts that have happened in local government have had an impact on the health service. Part of the crisis in A&E has come about from the cuts in local government, which have been cut in social, cuts and spending on social care, has had an impact back in hospitals. So, the public sector is all interrelated. It's not one bit or another. They all rely on each other.
I get the impression that, particularly talking about that on the health side of it, and the NHS on one side, then the support network on the other side, there's certainly more of a public awareness now than there was about how important that issue is. Is that translating into action, do you think?
Well, I mean, it was clear that, our members took industrial action over their pay last year and, in the NHS. And one of the things we were really pleased about, and it was clear that the public really supported us because they could see the work that NHS workers do day in, day out, looking after our families, making sure that when people are, vulnerable, when they're in need, they get looked after. And, people really value the NHS in this country, and they do value NHS workers. So we're beginning to see, and the public, even under all the pressure that our members are in under the NHS, the public, we still have a very good relationship with the patients and their families because they understand and they see those workers working flat out. The issue that we've got and the issue that the patients got is like with the government and, not providing enough funding.
And of course, everyone can understand, particularly from the health services point of view, the issue that we've got an ageing population, we've got a growing population, so the whole infrastructure's got to grow with it. Otherwise, people's workloads increase exponentially, don't they?
And the real big issue, and it still hasn't been tackled, is the issue around social care. As we become an ageing population, and that's got to be a good thing if people are living longer, and it's got to be a good thing that we try and keep people living in their own homes, because all the research shows that people live in their own homes. They live, have more active lives, they're happier, they're much more fulfilled. So, but we've got more people, more older people, so we need to have more people providing social care. And one of the real scandals that we have in this country is that social care as a profession, as a job, we put those that we love the most into the hands of those that we pay the least. Social care is one of the lowest wage part of the economy, but caring for our elderly, our mums and dads, our aunties and uncles, those people that we care and love a great deal, are being looked after by people who are paid so little. And actually, if we don't deal with this issue properly, we're going to have problems, well, we've seen them already, backing up into the NHS.
What's your background as far as, from a profession point of view, and how long you've been involved with Unison?
Well, my background is I've worked for a number of years as an engineer, working in different local authorities doing energy efficiency. So I've worked sort of on the tools and sort of with my brains as well, sort of like designing new systems to save energy, and got involved with the union, got active in the union, then later on got a job working for the union. Used to work in the East Midlands, part of the union, and came over to the West Midlands 4 years ago.
And how has the job that you do as regional secretary, how has that evolved or changed over the years?
I mean, the big change for us in Unison came with the election of the coalition government in 2010, because at that point, that was the point at which we started to see a government that was intent on hacking away at public services. There were cuts to council funding, there were cuts to police funding, there were cuts to all other aspects of the public services, and we started to see people losing their jobs. We've also seen, and you'll understand that there's been job losses because of the cuts, but also what we're seeing just on a normal day-to-day basis is there are far more grievances and disciplinaries happening in the workplace, because when times are difficult, when the pressure's there on employers and when the pressure's there on staff, then what you get are more grievances and disciplinaries, and we've seen an increase. And that's been a really big change for us. I
mean, I know one of the things that's been in the headlines most recently, certainly from Unison's point of view, is the feeling that you've expressed that the government's latest plans for things like the trade union bill is tightening the screw on the unions from the point of view of maybe making it harder for people, or giving people more of a reason not to be part of the union. Is that fair? Is that your view?
Well, I mean, it's really clear that what the government, the newly elected Conservative government come in, and they're really clear that they want to attack trade unions and attack the ability of working people to stand up for themselves. So a few things that we've got going on. And just remind your viewers, the MPs have just got themselves an 11% pay rise, and at the same time as them getting an 11% pay rise, they've said that nurses in hospitals are only worth 1% for the next 4 years. But at the same time, they're going to make it practically impossible for them to take industrial action, for them to be able to defend their rights and their ability to get a better pay rise, whilst the MPs are lining their own pockets with, 11%. That's pretty good. I think my members would be quite happy with 2 or 3%, actually.
I mean, I know that the trade union bill suggests raising the threshold. Is it you've got to have a 40% yes to an industrial action vote? Then
they're saying that you've got to have,
isn't it?
40% of the membership have got to vote in the ballot, and of that 40%, 50% have got to vote yes. Now, that would require a threshold that only 13% of MPs in the country actually meet currently. 40%, there are only 13% of the MPs in this country that have had more than 40% of the electorate vote for them. So, Sajid Javid, actually, who's an MP in this region, the business secretary who's been pushing this, he doesn't meet that threshold. The other thing that they're doing, which is a really nasty and vicious and vindictive thing, is they're going to make it, at the moment, from the majority of our members, we collect their subscriptions directly from the employers. It's called DOCAS, deduction of contributions at source. So the money comes out of their pay packet and goes to the union, and the employers do that, and we've got agreements with employers, and with some employers we pay them. And the government's saying that that's got to end because they're saying it's outdated. But it's not about it being outdated, and it's not about it costing employers, because employers still operate this scheme for payroll giving for charities. They offer it for those people who've heard about the Cycle to Work scheme, where you can buy a bicycle on a special scheme and you have money deducted from your salary. So there are many, many reasons why employers deduct money from people's salaries that are nothing to do with paying taxes and go to other organisations.
Although
the government are just picking on us.
Although the proposed changes, certainly they don't prevent people from remaining a member.
No.
It's not difficult still to
No, they're not. But what they're trying to do is make it more difficult for trade unions. I mean, if a charity, if somebody's employed by Sandwell Council and can use payroll giving to give money to a charity, why can't they use payroll deductions to give money to their union? And the government are saying they want to introduce legislation that says it will be unlawful for public sector organisations to do payroll deductions, only for trade unions. They're not saying it for charities, they're not saying it for the Cycle to Work scheme, they're not saying it for a whole host of other reasons why other third parties get deductions. So it's a nasty and vindictive attempt to make it more difficult for trade unions. And if we make it more difficult for trade unions, we make it more difficult for not just our members, but working people in general. Because, people watching this programme, some will be old enough to remember when their dads went out to work on a Saturday morning because we didn't have a 5-day working week, we had a 5.5-day working week. That 5-day working week was won by trade unions. People will remember the times when women didn't have the right to paid time off for maternity leave. We won that. We won that through trade unions. People remember the times when there wasn't four weeks guaranteed paid holidays. That's been won through trade unions. So we make a difference not just for our members, but we set the bar for other people as well.
We've seen this week the unemployment figure go up again. That's the second time in succession for the first time in quite a long time. When you've got a climate like that, does it make it a bit more difficult for you to justify members maybe complaining about conditions? Does it make if you've got if jobs are seen to be a bit more at a premium than they were, is it in your consciousness that you actually maybe change the way you operate there or not?
No, because I think it's about fairness, isn't it? It's about saying everybody understands what's about fairness and justice and what's right and wrong in the workplace. Whether there's high unemployment or not, you should be able to go to work without being bullied and harassed. Whether there's high unemployment or not, you should get a decent day's pay for a decent day's work. Whether it's high unemployment or not, you should be able to go to work without being racially abused. Now, those are sorts of issues that trade unions tackle every day, and we will continue to tackle. And you raise an interesting point with unemployment, because we're supposed to have a so-called economic recovery, but unemployment's going up. And here in the West Midlands, the West Midlands has been hit particularly hard, because when you look at the unemployment figures, even whilst it was getting better.
We're out of time, Ravi. I've got to leave it there. Thank you very much. Lots to think about. If you agree, disagree with anything you've heard on this week's Midlands Business Update, don't forget to get involved. Drop us an email to business@bigcentre.tv. We'll see you again soon.